Welcome to the California Educators Together podcast. California Educators Together is an initiative from the California Department of Education that is fostering a community of practice designed to provide educators, administrators, and specialists a common space to communicate, share strategies, and access free resources. Our team is leading lesson design institutes virtually and across the state of California, where we are paying teachers to develop lessons. On this podcast, you will listen to diverse hosts and guests from across the state as they join our platform and create lessons and resources for all California educators.
Let's get started. Let's see. Introduce yourself first. How many years teaching,
Yeah.
your experience, and where you are now.
My name is Elyce Jenkins. I teach right now at High Tech High Mesa in Claremont. It's one of our 16 schools in San Diego. This is my seventh year teaching and my fifth year here at Mesa. I started at High Tech Middle in Point Loma, and I was there in seventh grade for 2 years. It was a really fun 2 years. I always tell myself I'm probably going to go back to middle school.
Okay. Yeah. I did middle school for a hot minute, so I loved it. I love the kids, all of it.
Yeah, people say that like middle school is like you have to be a certain kind of person to not just do it well, but actually enjoy it. And
Yeah.
whatever that kind of person is, I think I'm that kind of person.
Now I feel the connection. Um, the all right, and tell us how did you get involved with California Educators Together first?
Yeah, I host residents or like student teachers with it's called the GSE program. It's like our in-house teacher credential program. So students in the credential program are taking program work and getting their credential, and they are placed with teachers within our organization. So I've been working with the GSE for a couple of years. I've had a number of residents, and my understanding is that California Educators Together reached out to High Tech and said, we're really interested in collaborating or partnering and working together.
Mm.
Um, where do we go? How do we start? And my understanding is they were directed to the GSE and said, like, the GSE are the teachers that we trust our student teachers with. These are the teachers you want to work with. And so I was approached, which is very flattering, very honored to be approached. And I started with I'm not sure what it was called, the 3 day or the 3 lesson 1 day workshop that we
Oh,
did.
the 3 hour thing. So yeah,
Yeah,
we called that one our partnership lesson. So you're the group that we piloted that with. So that was like in November or December or something.
which was really exciting. And I was like, also, because I had not heard of California Educators Together, I was a little unsure of what to expect. I feel like I was really pumped and really excited, and also a little like, I wonder what this is going to be about. This is really my first experience with publishing my work, publishing lessons and my curriculum, and it was awesome. I loved it. I walked out of those 3 hours really overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, I have a lot of work to do, but just pumped because
Yeah.
actually this is the part of teaching. Like I love all of teaching, but curriculum design and it's just I don't know,
Yeah.
it's passion of mine. So I was really excited to kind of like lean into that in a really meaningful way where I'm like now sharing my stuff with
Yeah.
whoever, I don't know, stumbles upon the website.
And your lesson stood out pretty quickly, and that was before you. Then from there, I know you came to our Lesson Design Institute. That was on at the end of January, beginning of February. And you also work with the SSPs, correct? You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, okay, I'll talk about the SSP. I have been partnered with, I was approached by she's kind of the CTE coordinator
Mm.
for our organization. Her name is Megan. I was approached by her about mentoring a school who is designing and rolling out CTE curriculum. So I've been partnered with South San Francisco and just kind of like working in lockstep with him, kind of overseeing the progress that he's making, leaving comments. Um, and it just so happened that these two things happened very closely like together.
Mm.
And so like when I was approach to design and actually publish on the platform, that was like perfect training to then now be in the position that I'm in, where I'm kind of overseeing and helping and supporting somebody who's like trying to navigate the platform. So
Mm.
it just so worked out that I had a lot of experience working with navigating the platform, and now I can apply that to a more of a mentorship role, which has been really cool and exciting.
Nice, nice, nice. So your lessons are phenomenal, and I'm gonna start. So I'm gonna pretend you're not in the room, and this is how I've been describing it to people. I'll say, you know how people talk about redlining? Like, did you ever really learn about that in college? And typically people will say something like, "Well, I did take a class, and it kind of talked about it." And I said, "Okay, well." I had somebody who broke it down to me so well, but while I was observing a lesson in a high school class, and like, wait, what? Like you actually they actually did that for a high school lesson and were able to like, have students engage. It's like, yeah, no, it was like some next level stuff. It's what everybody should learn, but appropriately set up and delivered like to 14, 15-year olds. And then it was funny because then I've had people come back and say like, I want to see the lessons, or I want to go in there and I want to learn, like, because these are the kind of the pieces that I've missed in my own education, etc. So the work is phenomenal. I've really appreciated it. Could you start out a little bit, tell us kind of like where'd you come up with the idea, and then how have you refined it? Or are we seeing like a finished product, or is this something that's continually been refined? And yeah, so just kind of tell us a little bit of the background on your lessons.
Yeah, great. Well, first of all, thanks for saying all that. I appreciate it. The lesson came from the first time I ever taught the lesson, like I designed it during like COVID when we were 100% online. The second semester of that year, we actually had hybrid. So we had kids coming to school half the week. And for that particular project, I was partnered with a science teacher, and we were building a community garden at our school. And so the science, the building, the physics, the planting, and the vegetables, all of the science was really strong. And what I felt was lacking was strong humanities content that would like feel important and also reinforce the work and the learning that they were doing in science. And so I came up with this idea. Where we're located is just a mile away from Linda Vista, which is a food desert. And so everything that we grew, we ended up donating. The garden was up and running for 3 years, and everything that was harvested was donated to the local food bank in Linda Vista. And so the humanities content was really around this idea of like food deserts. But part of food deserts, actually, food deserts by itself is, I think, a really important concept to kind of explore and consider. But actually, when we're thinking about like communities that don't have access to certain resources, there's so much more to that story, right? And so I decided that I really wanted to start, I wanted to end at food deserts, but actually I wanted to start with some historical context to help them understand what we're seeing in our local San Diego community in terms of like communities that are underserved and lacking resources and modern day segregation. And so that's where this project kind of came from. And kind of aligning with what you said, I didn't know much about it. I didn't learn about this. I got my master's degree in comparative literature, so I didn't know much about the history of San Diego or really, like housing segregation. Um, and so for me, I was like met with a couple dilemmas. First of all, I wanted to teach this content that I myself still was a little unsure of. And secondly, we were doing a lot of this learning asynchronously or online.
Mhm.
So how do I cover this really complex, really important uh, content in a way that is easy to understand and also is engaging and will engage them at home? And so it all came together for me when I found the website Mapping Inequality. Um, Anytime you have kids interacting with primary resources, interactive websites, especially during like the COVID closure time, anything where we could have them like actually engaging with the material it was really important to incorporate those kinds of opportunities. And so that website for me was just kind of like the clouds parted, and it just all kind of fell into place for me as like I am building a kick-ass lesson around this website because I think that this website is important, and I think that the information on the website is important. And that was it. I found a rad video on NPR that I've been using ever since. It's probably the best 6 minutes that you could find to meaningfully teach these really complex ideas
Mhm.
at the high school level. And I designed a graphic organizer that has students really like pausing at very important parts and reflecting in order to retain that information. So that's where the lesson started, was with this NPR video, this graphic organizer where they were like collecting their ideas and processing, and then applying that to looking at the primary sources on mapping
And did
inequality.
all of that happen like in that first iteration, or did it evolve over the years?
That was the first iteration. That was it.
Oh, you
Um,
just knocked it right out the park, right with the first swing.
well, I mean, I've added to it over the course of the last couple
Yeah.
years, but my thought is like it was so incredibly wildly successful. Of course, the bar was low because during COVID times, everything we did, we could juggle and do
We
backflips.
just wanted them to show
Nothing,
up.
nothing was working to get them engaged. But this lesson, there was something about this lesson. I think it's the perfect combination of this like really powerful 6 minute NPR video paired with like real world like exploration, these like maps of like this is the real map, this is the real language that was used by the HOLC. um it's just
That
something.
part was powerful. That part was powerful when the kids saw the language and in the video in the lesson demo video, the kids would say that why it hurt them so much because they would say things along the lines of to hear like officially people being described in this way
Yeah,
really hurt me to know that that's then what led to these effects. And,
yeah.
yeah.
The thing about it is that portion of the lesson, like looking at the historical redlining map, like they've already learned everything that they need to know in terms of content. They know what redlining is, and they are able to kind of understand some of those long-term lasting impacts because it's all discussed in the video.
Mhm.
When I'm having them explore the maps and on that website, the purpose of the lesson is not necessarily to see what are the red line communities and what are the green communities. It's more to direct their attention specifically to language. So, yes, of course, like look at the geographical like layout, look at the colors and look at the boundaries and look at the borders. But more specifically, if you notice in that graphic organizer, I'm actually asking them to look and consider the language that is used because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter to me if they can identify, the specific line that might separate a red and a yellow.
Mhm.
Actually, the purpose of that particular part of the lesson is for them to get into the heads of the HOLC, to kind
Mhm.
of like plop themselves into the 1930s and have a better understanding of the like what was socially acceptable or
Um,
what those criteria were that the HOLC was looking for in order to then make a decision around what color this particular region would be, right? So like they've already learned about the redlining. They've already learned about like
mhm.
the space and the physical like lines and criteria and all of that. Like for me, the most powerful part of that second lesson when they're using the redlining map is let's put ourselves in the minds of an HOLC worker and like try to understand what it was that they were looking for. And then
Um,
once we're recognizing that problematic language, like what does this mean? What does this mean about
mhm.
the government back then? What does this mean about people back then? What does this mean about the people that were in power and what they felt were important and the legislation or the policies or the whatever that they were enacting?
Mhm.
Um, and then, of course, we continue to build on that even over the course of the lesson as the unit continues.
So one of the parts that I mean, even just having this conversation with you that I really enjoy is that Because you said too, you said that you didn't know the scope of kind of the lessons, the work, the topic, and then you explored it. So you demonstrated the lifelong learner, component in yourself. Like this is something that I want to be into, and this is something that I want to learn. And then you broke it down into the pieces that so that it can make an impact, and then you passed it on, and now you refine it and you share it with people. So I guess well, first I want to say thanks because you're showcasing, what a teacher is, right? It's somebody that's creating new lessons, creating new experiences, finding new things, constantly expanding, and then modeling what that creativity and excitement could be, and then passing it on to kids. Um, and so I think because e- education is challenging, right? And people are always looking for like how can we, there's burnout, burnout's real. Like how can we be creative? And I think I don't know if you see it, but like that's some pretty creative stuff that you've modeled here. What advice would you give to a teacher or somebody who wants to take like a step like this? Because it's a brave step, right? To try and explore something new, but
Yeah.
the outcomes, like this is fun. This is good stuff.
Yeah, I want to I think it's important to just name that I've only ever worked as an educator within the organization, like within high tech. And I think um and again, I can't speak for other districts or other schools or other models of education, but what I know about project-based learning and this organization in particular is we really are empowered and encouraged to learn alongside kids.
Mm,
And it just feels like how wonderful to like come into an organization and not feel like I'm supposed to know all these things. Like, what kind of pressure does that put on educators? Like, you have to be an expert in this thing in
have to be
order to
perfect out of the box.
in order to effectively teach students, right? I I think that being hired at High Tech High has like really kind of I got my footing in and I got my like sea legs, if you will, in an organization that really like that encourages you to be okay with like exploring concepts and ideas with students that
Mm.
you may not necessarily know. And there's something really incredibly beautiful about that level of vulnerability with students. Like, actually, I don't know this. Let's figure this out together.
Yeah. So anybody that goes into your lessons, if you could just give us the names, and then like, do you have any suggestions? Like here, here's some things that you look at or potential, or even if somebody like really enjoys your lessons, and then they think of like what are potential other directions that they can go with it. So one of the things you mentioned was like going with food deserts, but yeah. So just what are things that people can expect, and then if anybody's looking for advice for where to move forward, like if you have any potential ideas.
Yeah. Okay. So this unit that is on the website right now, it's just a small 1 week unit that's part of actually a much bigger project, as I discussed before. The first time we ever did it was online and it was tied to this garden project. So that's a really engaging way. That's a really fun, kind of like meaningful connection to the humanities content. Um, in more recent years, because the garden's no longer up and running, in more recent years, I've taught this content as a week-long kind of model unit for a much bigger podcast project. So NPR has a student podcast challenge every year, and with the support of teachers, students can submit their podcasts, and there's like an honorable mentions list, and the winner gets like I think it's like a $5,000 prize. So it's like this kids are like really into it. And how I have always approached it is NPR also has a podcast series called Throughline. Throughline is a series that looks at modern day situations or questions or problems, and it over the course of the podcast kind of explores the historical roots that kind of lead to this modern day project or problem. And for me, modern day housing segregation is the perfect kind of, we're going to look at this modern day situation. Segregation ended officially, right? Decades ago. And yet, why are our communities laid out the way that they are? So here's this like modern day issue. Let's trace back. Let's go back to the Great Depression so that we can understand the New Deal, so that we can understand the HOLC and then redlining maps and then all of the lasting consequences that have brought us to here today, right? So my thought is if you're not doing this just as like an isolated week-long unit, you might think about what deliverable they could apply all of this learning to, such as like a podcast or a documentary. What I love about this project is that while housing segregation and redlining in general was like a national thing. There is so much emphasis that I in my class um, turn towards San Diego, our local community. And
Mm.
so like students are learning about this big, massive, major thing, but they're doing it through the lens of our community, like the streets and the cities and the towns that they know, right? And so a lot of the content that is on the platform right now is specific to San Diego, but there's so much resources. There's so many maps, newspaper articles. There's so many videos that you can find online that are specific to your community or maybe like a city that's near you, so that it does feel a little bit more close to home for the students. So that is one thing that I would recommend. Educators that are not in California or not in San Diego, like how can you use the lesson, but modify it or find resources that are going to make your students feel more connected to it. Um, I would say those are probably my bigger recommendations. The On the website, the third day of the 5 days is a side-by-side map comparison where they're looking at racial demographic maps of modern day. It's technically from the 2020 census data, so it's not super current, but they're looking at racial demographic in major cities next to the redlined communities, like the red line maps from the 1930s.
Wow.
And I've done it when we were on COVID, we did it all digitally. And it was definitely, I highly recommend printing those poster size because there's something about looking at them on a larger scale. It's first of all a lot easier to see things. And secondly, it just feels like students are able to kind of like in small groups kind of surround the material and kind of process and analyze together in a way that if they're looking at it digitally, you're not going to get the same experience, and the students won't have the same experience either.
Hmm. Yeah, it minimizes like there's something about everybody, like artwork. Like it's one thing to have it on your phone, it's one thing to have it on the tablet or the computer, but to have it up and then everybody being around it, and that's the number one focus. Like it made an impact, like a big impact on the kids, I can tell. And everybody likes to be up.
Kids, move your kids, get them moving.
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been a great conversation. Really appreciate you taking the time, all the different ways that you engaged with us throughout the year. And I just want to say, keep doing amazing work. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.